Marty Walsh is here, and I'll let you answer that. Is this a sign of things to come? And what's with this pledge, anyway?
First of all, thank you for having me on today, and it's great to be back. I don't even know. I mean, today I didn't realize that Councilor Connolly was going to be calling for a press conference to talk about the pledge, and completely caught me off guard. So when they called my office for a response, I figured we'd do our own press conference and talk about the pledge and talk about how it was handled in the primary.
Well, but I mean, is this? He wants you to basically say that you're not going to take a lot of money, like he rejected some money in preliminary from an outside source because it could sway the thing one way or another. Do you not want to do that?
No, it's just the way that came out. During the primary, Councilor Gonsalvo had suggested that we all take a pledge and sent a letter out. And Councilor Connolly then refused to sign the pledge, and at the point he was getting large amounts of money, possibly in the millions, from Stanford Children. Got some pressure, called a press conference, said he's not going to take the money. They asked him the question, would you sign a pledge? He didn't. He said, I'm not going to sign a pledge. An hour later, he's on TV, he's saying he's going to sign a pledge. And then during the campaign, he got over $100,000 into his campaign, or on behalf of him in the campaign. So
you're not signing anything?
I'm not signing a pledge.
Bottom line.
No, I'm not responding to this.
So everybody wants to know, and this is going to be the big issue here, what are the big differences between the two of you? I know yesterday was your first day on the campaign trail, but you appeared on Jim and Marjorie on Boston Public Radio. When asked that question, here's a little bit of what you had to say, and I'm just going to ask you to elaborate on that.
The difference is values versus education, and I think that's important. You know, I talked last night about values, and I talked about the importance of representing all of Boston, every neighborhood in Boston, and I think that that's what this race is going to come down to.
Values versus education. What do you mean by that?
I mean, my campaign is just not based on one issue. We've been talking about all the different issues throughout the campaign, economic development. We've been talking about poverty in my campaign. We've been talking about public safety and crime. And we have been talking about education. Education is a very important piece of this discussion. But we're not just simply a one-issue candidate.
But when you say values, I mean, what's suggesting there that you have a different value system?
No, just the fact that in the city of Boston, it's important to talk about values and continue moving Boston forward. And when we're talking about values, to kind of compare it to when we talk about poverty and the gap between the middle class and the poor, and we talk about there's a gap there, but they all have the same values as far as wanting to advance themselves and as far as moving Boston and doing better. It wasn't a statement necessarily about its values versus the other person doesn't have any values. It's just about we're talking about values of importance in the city of Boston, importance to the people of the city of Boston, and those values go back to economic development, education, all the other issues that we've been talking about.
One of the cornerstones of your preliminary was this idea of opening an Office of Recovery Services, which would people with drug abuse problems and alcohol problems and now possibly gambling problems because we're going to be opening a casino. Is this a priority?
It's important. It's a very important piece of my campaign. It's not the number one issue of the campaign, but it certainly is a piece. The other day, on Monday, before primary, I was driving through Dewey Square, and I saw there was a young man there on the side of the road, and I put the window down. He was a young man I coached, and I asked him, "You doing okay?" And he says, "I'm not going to lie to you, no, I'm not." And this is a 30-year-old man. I still view him as a little kid because I coached him in hockey years ago. You know, no place for him to go. And he's kind of wandering around South Station. And we have a lot of people in Boston that just don't have any place to go. And this epidemic of heroin and drugs that we have is a big epidemic. So wherever you are in any neighborhood in the city of Boston, this is an issue we have to deal with. And we're dealing with it to some degree, but I really want to make it a bigger...
Well, isn't there an irony in the fact that here we are creating a whole subset of these problems, namely gambling addiction, and then we're going to have to put more city resources into solving it when we're creating it in the first place?
No, we have a problem with gambling now. I mean,
well, we're going to have a bigger one.
I don't know if that's necessarily going to be true. I don't think it's going to be bigger. I think we actually, one way of looking at the casino, if it comes to East Boston, actually even if it doesn't come to East Boston, one of the things we built into the legislation was the fact that we put $5 million into gambling addiction services. Right now in the Commonwealth, we put anywhere between $200,000 and $400,000 a year, depending on the budget. This is going to dedicate $5 million to that pot of money that people are going to be able to access. And I think that that's one thing that's positive that comes out of the gambling casinos, if you will.
You've been somewhat defensive about your relationship with the Boston Building Trade Union because that's your livelihood, which is great. And you've admitted you had a lot of union backing in the preliminary, but you said you had 1,500 supporters and field workers that had nothing to do with unions out there. And clearly, I mean, you're the top vote getter, so you had to have more than just that kind of backing. But you took a beating, like a hammering, from the Boston Herald in their editorial. It was like anybody but Marty Walsh. I guess not everybody was listening to them. And then,
thank God.
And then you saw where Joan Vanacki wrote earlier this week about who's going to win. She said, just part of what she said, if Connolly is cast as the brave reformer who is ready to take on the public unions, and Walsh is defined as the guy who will tell those unions he has given them all he can, then Walsh loses. Meaning, if you're going to be tough with the unions and then they decide, oh, well, he isn't our friend anymore, he's not going the extra inch, they're not going to support you.
That's not true. I mean, I'm not worried about that at all. I mean, there's going to be there's an arbitration award coming out very soon with the police department. A lot of rumors around it, and those are things as mayor of the city of Boston we should prevent. We should prevent from going to arbitration. We should prevent from these contract negotiations going down. Talking tough up front is important, but it's also important to have transparency. We have to be able to put down the cards on the table to find out what we're talking about. So when I'm negotiating with the unions, and by the way, I won't be negotiating with the building trade unions, I'll be negotiating with the public employee unions. And in the primary, only a couple of those unions endorsed my candidacy. Some of the big ones didn't. The teachers didn't support me at all. They went with two other candidates. AFSCME didn't endorse me in the primary. So there's a lot, and the police didn't endorse me in the primary. So there's a lot of unions out there that didn't endorse me. So I don't know if that's a sign that they didn't feel I was going to be so open to them. If I was going to be this open to everyone, you would assume everyone would come on board with me.
Look, housing is going to be another huge issue for everybody. Mayor Menino wants to get another 30,000 units on board by 2020, I think it is. And you see that thing today in the newspaper about the 175 units down near the seaport that would be no car parking. Isn't that kind of a charade? I mean, for one thing, that whole area is already so overloaded. There's not enough transportation for people. So, and people are going to have cars. They're going to put them on the street just because there's no parking spots. That
proposal is a little difficult. I found it interesting when I heard they were going to build that big of a development without any parking at all. There was a development in my district as a state rep, which VA did, which is a CDC, 44 units, no parking, and actually, in that case, very little impact on the community, but you had an MBTA station right there. The problem with the seaport is you really don't have a strong public transportation system. Right. Maybe in the summertime people will walk to and from the places they're going, but in the wintertime, that's a cold walk in the wintertime, walking down the seaport. Yeah. So I'm interested to see how that's going to play out and work, because, I mean, one thing we hear constantly on the campaign trail is traffic and parking. In almost every neighborhood in the city is talking to me, what are you going to do about the parking? Very difficult issue to deal with. And now we're talking about building in downtown without any parking. I'm not sure how that's going to work out. Well,
that's a good point. So you're going to do 3 televised debates.
Yes.
Do the two campaigns just get together and say, let's cut to the chase on this before that it gets too madness with the media and all?
Yes, my campaign manager, May Costello, sat down with John, or spoke to John's campaign to talk about it, because there was a lot of requests coming in a very short period of time. I mean, you're talking after today, 40 days. And, we've gotten a lot of requests for forums and debates, and not that they're not important, but we also need time to go out and campaign and meet people and talk to people. So these debates and other things take away a lot of time to meet with the average voter in the street. A lot of the forums are special interest forums, and I think they're important, but we also got to get, you're talking now, very different race. I have to go out and try and attract the voters from all the other campaigns to see if they'll, sell myself to them and be able to make sure I'm their second choice and their first choice November 5th. And by doing that, we have to put some restrictions on some.
And just quickly on the whole issue of the communities of color, and there's been a lot of talk in the aftermath that Charlotte Goler-Ritchie, if she had support of all the communities of color and they had narrowed that race down, that she might have won. What are you going to do to get that support?
Nothing different than I haven't done already. I'm going to be out in the neighborhoods. I'm going to be shaking hands, knocking doors, passing my message about what I've done as a politician and what I've done as an elected official over the years. I'm also, I'd love to have some. I already have some support from the other campaigns. Some of the folks that worked volunteering in campaigns. I haven't spoken to the candidates. I haven't talked to the candidates. I'm giving them a few days. I mean, it was 4 months and very difficult. I mean, most people call me that night, and I felt it's hard. You feel we bonded. We actually bonded our campaigns, a lot of the candidates, and so I'm giving people a few days, but I'm reaching out to the campaigns, the different the volunteers, if you will, to ask them to come on board, and we've been successful so far.
Good luck. All right, Marty Walsh, we look forward to seeing you in the 40 days to come.
Yeah, hopefully I'll be back.
All right, you will be.